Hey everyone, Amia here from Resonance Astrology, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to take a deep dive into the Scorpio full moon that is happening on May 12th. This is happening next Monday, but we are definitely already feeling the build up now. And we are going to take a look at a few of the topics that are associated with Scorpio and taking just a deeper look at what does that truly mean. What does it mean when we say that Scorpio is intense? What does it mean that the moon is in its fall in the sign of Scorpio? What does it mean when we say that Scorpio is a sign of transformation? All of that we are going to explore today. Once again, this is going to be a deep dive. I'm going to talk a lot. It's also more free flow today. I actually have no notes whatsoever. This is completely channeled right now because yesterday I was sitting in my bed and I was like in some primal survivalistic, if survivalistic is a word, I'm not sure, but we're going to make it a word now. Just survival fears of like not having enough, financial stuff coming up, and just this fear of feeling like, oh my gosh, am I not gonna have enough? How am I gonna survive? And then it hit me. I was like, that's Scorpio. That's the essence of Scorpio, this survivalistic nature of the sign of Scorpio. And then I just tried to sit with it and talk to myself about it, get curious about it. Because Scorpio rules over a lot of these emotions that we deem as difficult. Survivalistic fears are one of them, or just survival fears. Okay, I don't know if survivalistic is a word, but just this fears that are very much linked to survival. Other emotions are grief, are shame, are depression, are resentment. Rage as well to some extent, although I would argue that that is a bit more of Aries territory, which makes sense because both of these signs are ruled by Mars. But Aries Mars is much more this warrior that like goes out, forges out into the world, is courageous by doing actions in an external sense. Scorpio, though, is the yin side of Mars. So it's much more internal. Okay, so the battle that we are fighting is an internal battle. It's happening inside. So it's much more still. It's much more secretive, right? Also a big word for Scorpio, because it's so hard to see. Like the things that are going on inside of us, it's so hard to grasp from an outside perspective what we are really going through, the internal battles that we are fighting. It's not the action that is visible in Aries, it's the action that is kind of invisible. And we see a similar process when we look at nature, at least here, from the perspective of the northern hemisphere. Scorpio rules over the dark part of the year. And it's fixed, right? So it's the middle of the season. Nature-wise, the leaves have all just fallen, okay? And we are kind of stripped with the bare and naked truth. This is why Scorpio is so real and raw about things, because it wants the real and raw truth of life. And that's kind of what it strives to constantly get towards. And why Scorpio also often has a bit of this like all or nothing quality, because to experience all of life requires us to sit through all the seasons of life, to sit through all emotions that come up through life. And these are heavy emotions as well. And maybe let's get into this first. Why is the moon in its fall in the sign of Scorpio? Well, first of all, Scorpio is fixed water, okay? It's the least watery water, because water by its essence has a very mutable nature in and of itself, okay? It's hard to grasp in and of itself. And even if we put it in our hands, like the boundaries that we create for water to put it inside something is we create it. And there's a lovely, lovely metaphor that I really like to use, and I think it makes us understand the nature of Scorpio a lot better, and also why the moon is in its fall in the sign of Scorpio. And part of that is from Diana Rose Harper, so I just want to shout her out. Like this is not my original metaphor or anything. But let's think about all the water signs from a standpoint of what would they, like what types of bodies of waters they would symbolize in nature. So if we think of Cancer, which is cardinal water, I immediately think of something as a spring. So something that is like the foundation of where the water comes from, or like a river that transports water. Then Pisces, the mutable water, is like the ocean, right? It's vast, it's big, there's so much going on. There's fish, there's coral reefs, there's lots of things going on. It's very mutable water, the ocean. But then Scorpio, fixed water. One thing I think about is like the quality of water. When you fix it, it's something like ice. And ice doesn't flow. Of course, we can melt it, but when we freeze water, it becomes ice, right? And in terms of bodies of water, something like a pond would be exemplified in the sign of Scorpio. So a pond is water that isn't movable, right? It stands there. There aren't any currents moving it back and forth. And now let's do a thought example of taking a drop of poison and putting it into each of these bodies of water. Put a drop of poison into a river or a spring or something. It gets flushed away, okay? It doesn't like stand in one place. It gets flushed away. It's movement. Put a drop of poison into the ocean. The ocean is so vast, like sure, maybe a drop of poison might do damage in this specific area where it was dropped, but in the vastness of the ocean, a drop of poison won't do so much significant damage. But put a drop of poison into a pond where there are no currents, where the water doesn't flow, it literally kills the whole pond. The whole life in the pond can die out. So the boundaries or the walls or the protective mechanism that Scorpio has is out of necessity, because it knows that one small amount of toxicity can poison its inner metaphorical pond for a long time, for lifetimes even, okay? So Scorpio needs to be very careful, needs to be very selective, because toxicity can ruin it so hard. And I think this metaphor is so good in understanding like Scorpio as an archetype in general, but also the moon, why the moon is and its fall in the sign of Scorpio. Because if we think of emotions, what are like fixed, static emotions? I mean, at its worst, you could say it's depression, right? Like static emotion, like emotion that does not go through easily, is literally depression. That is maybe the most static phase that we can be, like just complete depression. And depression is repression, which is interesting, right? Because it actually means that depression is so much emotion, is actually so much repressed rage mostly. We are so overwhelmed, our body literally just shuts down. So when we feel nothing, we are actually feeling everything so much that it feels like we're feeling nothing, and it becomes static, and the pond dies. And other emotions that would fall into that category, which are also heavy, not as static as depression, but are like rage, grief, shame, all of these emotions that are heavy, that are not easily processed through the body. And the moon itself also rules over the body, okay, like just the body in and of itself. And it's also interesting, the sign of Scorpio does not have any exaltations there. So it's really just Mars is very strong in the sign of Scorpio, and then the moon is in its fall, and Venus is in its detriment there. There's no exaltations in the sign of Scorpio. This is also, I think, why Scorpio is such like a harsh sign, or is experienced by a lot of us as this harsh energy. And at the same time, we need an archetype that like is in the field of the grand cosmos, that like exemplifies that exemplifies this harshness of life and deals with these difficult topics of life that most of us, honestly, when we're honest, kind of just would rather run away from. And Scorpio does so too, actually, you know? I think that's what a lot of people get wrong about Scorpio, and like this transformative factor of Scorpio is that okay, let's put it this way. Mutable signs are much more changeable, shiftable, and adaptable. The transformation that comes with the sign of Scorpio is one out of necessity. Scorpio changes because it is threatened. Scorpio is a fixed sign, okay? All the fixed signs don't have an easy time when it comes to dealing with changes. This is why, again, the pond can rot. If we don't take care of our metaphorical pond, our inner pond, it rots. One drop of poison, one like toxic relationship, one toxic work environment can poison our inner pond for a long, long, long time. Okay, this is why Scorpio also has such a hard time forgiving, because it's so hard. Okay, it's so hard when we're innerly poisoned to move through that. Like, we have to heal from this poison first. We have to purge it, okay? This is also why, like in Taurus, and this is interesting, right? Because the full moon in Scorpio is always going to be opposite the sun in Taurus. And Taurus, from our body organs, rules like the intake, okay? It rules the throat, what we take in. That's why, stereotype of Taurus is like food and everything. Okay, but let's go further. The other part, which is Scorpio, is assimilating it, and it's like it has to do with our sexual organs and all of that, but also the organs that are excrementory. Is that the word you say it? I'm not quite sure. I don't think that's the word, but I think you guys know what I'm trying to say. Just the organs that push out the excrements of like the food that we have digested. So Taurus is about taking in, Scorpio is about letting go. Obviously, both of these signs can go into one extreme or the other, but we get this interesting balance here. And the reminder as well, I think here is also that the capacity to experience pain and sit with these hard emotions actually, ironically, opens us also to experience new levels and depths of experiencing joy and pleasure into our life. And actually, if we want to experience more pleasure in life, we have to be equipped and ready to experience also these harsher emotions. And this is really like the Scorpio Taurus reminder. And even again, if we go back into the world of nature, again, Northern Hemisphere here, Taurus rules over spring, like the spring season right now. It's when everything is in bloom. It's literally like the birth of nature and like the full beauty of nature that we are experiencing, like the flowers and everything. And then in Scorpio, first we get Libra season, which interestingly enough is another Venus ruled season. Which is another beautiful season, right? Both of these seasons, the middle of spring and the beginning of autumn, when like all the leaves are in its full colors, are deemed as like the most beautiful seasons. So it's no coincidence that both of them are ruled by Venus. But then in Scorpio, we get the assimilation process. We put everything into the compost, and what happens during the whole winter? The compost is being assimilated for the new growth of these beautiful flowers that we get in spring to actually bloom, to be nourished. So the Scorpio process, this transformative process, is very private, is very not visible, which is again why we're coming back to this internal battle that we are fighting here. And then, let me think what I also want to say. I think there's just, this changeable and transformative part of Scorpio. I think we have to look at this a bit more. Again, I already talked a bit about it. Scorpio changes when it is pushed into a corner. And when Scorpio feels like, I simply have to give myself to this, then it surrenders. And when Scorpio surrenders, this is when the transformation happens. But when Scorpio surrenders, it fully knows that I will surrender to either dying or living. And this is also why it's called death and rebirth, okay? Death and rebirth. This is always this life, death, life cycle, which is also so visible between, again, Scorpio and Taurus on an archetypal level. But again, here we have, I just think it's so interesting because most people just are like, oh yeah, Scorpio likes to transform and change. Scorpio doesn't like to change that much. It doesn't like to transform all the time. It does have to do this to survive. The transformation of Scorpio is the lifeline of Scorpio. This is how it survives and lives. And actually also why it's kind of linked to this survival fears, because oftentimes Scorpio in and of itself is a very survivalistic, like it lives in the survival mode all of the time, like just Scorpio on an archetypal level. But we can definitely also observe this with people that have prominent Scorpio placements, usually people that have a hard time like getting out of survival mode because it always feels like there's just a crisis around the corner. Which Scorpio can learn from the opposite sign of Taurus of like, okay, let's invite a bit more pleasure into my life. What if we can just rest without the need of being productive? A very different energy, right? And it's also no coincidence that when we look at the sign of Taurus, there we have the opposite thing. There are no fallen planets in the sign of Taurus. The moon is in its exaltation in the sign of Let me literally say that again. The moon is in its exaltation in Taurus, Venus is in its home sign, and Mars is in its detriment. And that's it. There's no fallen planets in the sign of Taurus. Exactly. So I think that's just like we have to keep that in mind to understand both of these signs from an archetypal level. And it's also something we can obviously observe in our birth charts. Depending on where Scorpio is landing in your birth chart, it might hit really close to home. It's like, where are you constantly transforming out of necessity or like crisis moments that often come up? Scorpio just like thrives in these moments. And sometimes Scorpio even subconsciously, maybe sometimes even consciously, searches I cannot speak English anymore. Searches these moments where it can go head into the battle because it knows that it gains power from this transformation that comes. Okay, and also why Scorpio often has this like all or nothing mentality, because that's how it lives the best life, okay? Scorpio lives its best life when it can give itself fully to life. There's an interesting fullness that just belongs to Scorpio where it's like, I want to live and experience life in the fullest. And this means sitting with grief, sitting with shame, oftentimes purging these emotions, going through them, raging, like how can I turn this though into power, okay? Because it's not easy and we can get stuck with these emotions for years and years and years before we feel like there is a necessity for us to actually change. Scorpio is still a fixed sign, doesn't like to change so much. But when the Scorpio full moon comes around every year, we are often pushed into this corner where it's like, will you surrender to that? And the surrendering requires of you to metaphorically die so you can be reborn again. And that is not easy to do for most of us, especially in a society that pushes these emotions down so much. And I think most of us that have sat with these emotions had the luxury of sitting down with these emotions. I would say most of people are in survival mode. They don't have the luxury of even sitting or allowing them to sit down and feel these emotions, because I think most of us know that we are going to be changed, that we are profoundly deep to our core going to be changed by sitting with these emotions. And that is scary. But you know what? It's okay. Mars is like, is it scary? But are we going to do it anyway? It's like, but did you die? Okay, I know that it feels like dying. I know that it feels like that. But it is a rebirth moment in and of itself. And it requires for us to metaphorically die and lean into that process. Because then the flowers can bloom and sprout much more beautifully. I think nature, and especially Taurus and Scorpio season, and also kind of Aries and Libra season, they're really right. The seasons around the spring equinox and the autumn equinox, I think, are really the best reminder that nature itself is a constant life, death cycle, and that it needs death to be reborn again, and that it needs life to die again. And so we are also metaphorically in different seasons in our life all the time. Sometimes we are in a dying season, sometimes we are in a rebirth season, and that can happen at any time. The dying season can last 5 years. It doesn't, or the like rebirthing season can also last 5 years. Okay, there isn't any like limit on how long or short this should last. And then going back to society, which and I have observed this so many times as well, because I worked as a psychiatry nurse for roughly 6 years, you could say. I did my apprenticeship there. And even there, you'd be surprised. You would think like that is the place where we are sitting down and going through our emotions. And it's like, no, that's like maybe the even more judgmental place. Like people are getting freaking locked up in isolations by feeling their emotions. I'm not saying that it's wrong all the time, but I think there's just like a huge gray area, and especially putting people together in a space, like putting so many people together that are already so vulnerable. Like, is that the best choice? I don't know. I just feel like throughout the years, I just come to the conclusion that I don't think you can get like real full healing there. Like, I think psychiatries offer us, or clinics or therapists, they offer us a lot of tools, but there's something that is just like missing. And I think it's this like metaphorical and spiritual aspect that kind of just gets ignored most of the times and pushed aside. Because so many people that work there, first of all, also have so many issues. It's like, why work there in the first place? Like most people that are interested in these things have their own issues and things they've gone through. Because, I mean, for one, it's also good, right? Because, like, experiencing maybe some trauma and things ourselves gives us a better insight into helping people going through these states. But at the same time, working there, I have learned, I mean, just like straight up, most things get sedated as soon as possible. Medications, once again, I'm not saying that this is specifically wrong. I think when somebody is in an acute psychosis, which is definitely not necessarily the realm of Scorpio in and of itself, but when somebody's in an acute realm of psychosis, it's like things have already gone like way beyond, and sometimes that is the smartest thing to do. Because honestly, there's just so many societal factors that we would have to just change, like for psychiatries to change. But the system works now the way it does for a reason. Let's just put it that way. But, even from like a medical perspective, there is this like wall we put up of like not being comfortable in letting people experience the rawness. That's what I felt a lot of times while I was working there, and like the problem I kind of had with that. But honestly, at that time, I was uncomfortable feeling my own emotions in that way. But I'm wondering if it was because most of the times that I've seen people like, have explosive rage or anything like that, it didn't mean anything good, And so I'm just wondering, like, from a societal level, like, we just don't make room and space for this. And again, like, insurance-wise, you go to a clinic, you can be there a few months. Grief takes way longer to process. Sitting with shame, even just opening yourself up to experiencing that is so overwhelming at first. Because to truly heal that, we need to feel safe. And most of us don't feel safe in our environments in the first place, especially not when the Scorpio full moon chimes in, because the moon rules our bodies, rules our environments as well. The body is one environment, but our nearby environment is also ruled by the moon. This is why sometimes in birth charts, when we look at the moon, the natal moon placement, it kind of gives us insight into like the environment the person is dealing with or has been born into. So there is a constant distrust in the environment, in the experiencing of emotions when it comes to Scorpio. Things feel like a threat. Existence feels like a threat. Which is interesting, and the antidote to that simply is to allow ourselves to experience that. Which is why we have to get shoved into this corner where it's like, I have to surrender. I simply have to surrender. Like, I have to surrender to this intensity, and like, I either fucking die or go crazy, or I somehow get reborn again and do this transformation. That's why Scorpio is real and raw and tough. Like, most of us are scared doing these things. Most of us don't have like a good field of like being alone and experiencing these things, or having a group of people experiencing these things. I know for me, for sure, I first felt most comfortable experimenting by myself with these things. I didn't feel safe around a lot of people. Once again, probably because of like, I was a psychiatry nurse, so I saw what that means, and I just had this intrinsic fear of like, maybe if I let the intensity take over me, I'm gonna lose my mind, and they're gonna isolate me and put me into this isolation box, room. I don't know how it's exactly called. I guess isolation room. And I was like, that's just going to be even more traumatizing, like, why would you, I don't know, like, I get it to like if somebody's sensory overwhelmed, but is it like, it just makes you feel more trapped. I don't know. I'm not sure if that is the best. And I just think like, as a society, what does that mean that we lock these things away, that we lock these people away? What does it mean that we constantly run away from experiencing the raw expression of life? Because if we would actually sit down, like communal level, like sit down when somebody is grieving, like be there for them. 2 years, 3 years, even longer. Some people grieve 10 years, or shame, or sitting with shame. Like if we did this in a ritualistic way, I just did that in like a sisterhood circle where I was like witnessed and sitting with my shame. I was like, brother, like that healed me more than 10 years of therapy ever did, where I was just talking about it. So I just think it's interesting from a societal level of what happens. And I think that's why Scorpio is so difficult, because most of us just don't like the answer. The answer, which is that by not feeling these emotions, not sitting with them, it means that we are constantly just fueling the survival economy, which again is hard to get out of it once you're in it. I'm not saying it's easy. Like the answer is just not easy, okay? But that's Scorpio. It wants the real, honest, raw answer. And that is the real, honest, raw answer. That most of us, if we actually would be able to sit down, like have the financial means, have the communal means, it would take us years to really go through the grief, the shame, the depression, like feeling all the things we have repressed. The resources are just not there. Like structurally, foundationally, on a societal level, the resources are simply not there. Most people that work in these professions don't even have enough time themselves to actually sit down with these things. And that's the harsh answer, honestly. The other harsh answer to all of this is that when we repress it, right, it's like, when you put this inflatable ball underwater, you can put it underwater, but at one point, like it slips under your hand and it shoots out. It shoots out of the water. hits you right in the face, maybe. That's what happens. So ironically, by repressing these emotions, we're actually just delaying the response of then being even more overwhelmed when eventually our body is just like, stop, I like, now I'm shutting down. And this is how dis-eases are created, right? How dis-eases of all sorts are created in our body. Because if we don't say stop and no, our body says stop and no eventually for us. And then we are in a much bigger hellhole. Because then we are forced. But sometimes we need that, okay? Because again, Scorpio is necessity. Mars is necessity. Sometimes the only way we can change is if we are put in this corner. And this corner is different for all of us. And I have seen it so many times again throughout my years working as a psychiatry nurse. There are people that seek help immediately. They go to their therapist immediately when something is slightly wrong. There are people that, I'm just thinking of like one person, like he basically got to us from, I don't really know how to translate this word from German into English, to be completely honest, but we call it Efu, which is like, basically if you are a danger to yourself or people around you, or you get like called by the police or somebody else, and then it's like an emergency. Like you're not there by your free will, but I'm not sure exactly how to translate that. You know, like, I guess some woman kind of found out after weeks, months, I think, I'm not sure, that he was just like isolating himself in his room, not even really eating. So the necessity for this man to change even went beyond like him actually being able to do anything about it. It had to come from an outside source. And sometimes that is like that. Sometimes that is like that. That is also surrender. I don't know, maybe he like somehow surrendered in some way, because we're all connected to one another, right? We're all connected to one another. We're all feel each other way more than we would like to admit. And maybe that internal surrender did something that like maybe a woman from outside was just like, oh, something is not right here. Let me call the police. And that's how he came to us. So the threshold is very different for different people. So let's just keep that in mind, okay? Because again, when the Scorpio full moon comes in, puts us into a corner. And it's kind of up to us. Sometimes Scorpio can be almost addicted to low points. I say this from personal experience because I'm a Scorpio sun and rising, so I have my experience with Scorpio. But there was a time in my life where I just felt like I did not reach enough low point in my life. Like, I just felt like, it needs to go even lower. It needs to go even lower. And it's even so weird to admit that, but I'm sure if there's anybody watching that has Scorpio placements, like, you will totally get what I mean. There was just this feeling of like, no, I have not yet experienced the real rawness, the real abyss of life. Like, I want to go there, and it's scary. And it was also one of the reasons why I personally initially wanted to work as a psychiatry nurse, is because I wanted to see people in these raw, unfiltered moments of life. I wanted to see and sit with the things that most people constantly turn away from. That was my interest. But there was just a point that I missed where, you know, I thought I was so cool and detached, Jupiter in Aquarius, that I missed the point where the darkness, if you can say it, started consuming me. And I didn't realize that, oh, actually, I'm scared of that too. Like, now I have to go sit with that, but I'm scared. So Scorpio is an interesting and intense sign. And what else happens if we repress all of this on a societal level? You know, we then get these news of shootings, of all of that. These things that are not easy to deal with, you know? And yet still we have these urge. Most of us, I mean, actually me not so much, but I know there's so many people like But then we're addicted to going on YouTube and looking at these videos of how could this young child murder her mother? How could she? There's this interest in us that most of us just don't want to admit, that there is a rawness and realness of life we want to experience, we then go to experience with other people. And then we shame them. Even though all of us have these instincts inside of us, and in a different circumstance, we could be that person on the news being, the murderers, all the societal misfits that are so deeply misunderstood. I'm not saying we have to like sit here and like forgive murderers and anything like that. I hope I'm not like, I hope you're not missing the point here. The point I'm trying to bring is just that, like, why are we, because we're so addicted to like hearing these courtroom hearings and all of that. And it's just a reminder that, the line is very thin, can be very thin. Okay, and we can choose pretty much like where we want to go. There was also a time in my life where I was like, and again, it's where I was like, yeah, like, do I go even deeper into the abyss? Do I go even deeper? Do I really need an even deeper low point, or is it enough? Like, when is destruction too much? When are you literally self-mutilating or assimilating yourself? Because again, Scorpio is one of the only animals that can, has its stinger, can actually kill themselves. And this is why Scorpio also runs the risk of literally destroying itself or destroying its own metaphorical inner pond. Once again, we either have the choice it's this choice. We're either going to die or we're going to live. It's all or nothing. It's this or that. And these are just the harsh questions of life. And this is what I think people misunderstand about Scorpio so much. And the archetype that just needs to exist. Like, this needs to exist because it does exist. The urge for that does exist. People want the real, raw things of life. But we'd rather hide behind a screen, We'd rather hide behind a screen and judge from behind. Because we are not the ones in that position, right? Because we are not the ones in that position. But it's in all of us. This instinctual nature exists within all of us. And just imagine, what would happen if we actually made room and space and we had the societal structures where we offered rituals for sitting with these things. I think crime rates would probably drop so much. But I think it's probably something that will never truly ever change, because then the archetypes itself wouldn't really exist anymore. I think it's something we just have to accept, but it's up to us to be able, like, at the end, we can make the choice what we do with our own lives. And if we decide to go into that route or the other route. And what we do when we are pushed inside the corner. Are we courageous enough to lean into the transformation, or are we going to let it destroy us? And Taurus sun is like, no, let's create. Let's be brave and courageous and create. Let's bring life. Let's bring life into this again. For the flowers to bloom. Maybe we don't have to destroy ourselves. And maybe we can write a poem about it. Maybe we can sing a song about it. Maybe we can create a YouTube video about it. Maybe we can write a book about it. There's so many ways we can create out of this. This is literally the power of creation. I mean, Aries, Mars, is literally the power of creation in and of itself. So it's like in Scorpio as well. And I think maybe this is where we can begin to end this video, because I'm already at the 40-minute mark and it's a long ass video here. But I really just wanted to sit with that and invite you to sit with all of that as well. And just like think about it, feel about it. The Scorpio Full Moon is definitely inviting us to Sit down, feel, purge. Scorpio is always about purging and letting go. Although again, in its extreme nature, Scorpio can also like just purge and let go too much and focus on just cutting off. And it's like, no, that's not the purpose of this. The purpose of feeling more pain is to open ourselves to the capacity to feel more pleasure as well. Sometimes Scorpio forgets that it's not just death, that it's end, rebirth. But luckily we have the sun in Taurus that is opposing the Scorpio moon, reminding us that it is a rebirth as well. Death and rebirth. I think with this, we can end this video. If you enjoyed this video, if you enjoy me hearing... Once again, I cannot speak English. If you enjoyed hearing me talk about this, giving a thumbs up, liking this video, sharing a comment down below, sharing this video to somebody that you know and might find it useful, helps out more than you know. Sometimes, again, I think that's also like, sometimes it feels so fake sitting down after every video and being like, oh, make sure to leave a thumbs up. But it's like, seriously, it's like, if you found this useful, this is, for me, it's like I'm sharing medicine here, okay? Maybe it resonates with some, maybe it doesn't. But if it resonates with you, like, share it with somebody else. Maybe it resonates with them too, okay? And this is like the potent magic of like liking, sharing, subscribing, because it spreads the word, okay? And I don't think this is fake. So, I sincerely, if you found it useful, make sure to somehow engage because it helps out more than you know, seriously. And I'm also very active on Instagram. I usually share like post formats of the videos that I'm doing in some way or another, or even different posts. So if you like reading through this or having this in a format where you can like read through it again, then I definitely also highly recommend you giving me a follow on there. It's a fun world there as well. And yeah, I'm just really deeply committed to, sitting with these things. For me, the base of astrology is a relational one. And I've also just been thinking, because I feel like currently there's a lot of things around with ChatGPT. I don't have like a specific problem with ChatGPT. As a matter of fact, sometimes I also use ChatGPT just to help me like put things a bit more concisely. But at the end of the day, we want the real and raw truth. We want the real and raw human experience. And astrology is something you experience. It's not in textbooks. Yes, sure, you have the books because you need to learn. But astrology becomes the best when we sit down and experience it. Because if I didn't sit down yesterday and felt these heavy survival fears, I wouldn't have felt like, oh, this is this Scorpio archetype showing up in my life. ChatGPT can never do that. ChatGPT would never be able to like pinpoint that, or experiencing Mars, like a birth chart, like having your birth chart read by somebody that has lived and sat in the experiences is just never even going to come close. Even though ChatGPT is pretty good, at doing these things, it's just not the exact same thing. And Scorpio wants the real, raw, honest truth about life, which involves sitting with all the experiences, sitting with all the seasons. So yeah, that's it. Bye for now. And hopefully enjoy this transformative Scorpio full moon. Bye.